Dear friends, we are back again with Sir James Braha on an interesting topic today, transits. Many transits have happened this month, and Sir has also written a beautiful book on transit. Sir has edited this book and put this book again on Amazon, right, sir?
Yeah, something is wrong with something is wrong with the picture.
Sir, these are the pictures you have sent me.
You see, you can't see the power of planetary transits.
The power of planetary transits.
Can you see it? Can you read it?
Yes, sir, I can.
Oh, on my screen it. All right, on my screen it looks completely different, but okay.
How to predict your future, the power of planetary transits, secrets of Eastern and Western astrology. Below it is written, right?
Yep.
Yes. Sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Are we recording?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a book, How to Predict Your Future. This is a book that I wrote many years ago because there are so few books on transits, very, very few. And the reason that there are so few books on transits is because this is partly Western and partly Hindu. There's a whole section on the Dashas and Bhuktis. But the planetary transits in the Western system are so extensive that it takes about a year or a year and a half to write on the transits. So nobody writes them. There's very, very few. This was I think the second book on transits that was really comprehensive. And it took a long time. And back then, I also was, my first book was on Jyotish. So in this book, How to Predict Your Future, most of it is planetary transits, but I wanted to also spread the word of Jyotish. So the second part of the book is a whole section on dashas and bhuktis. But anyway, I just put this book, I did some editing of it recently, the last month, and I put it on Amazon, so it's there now. It's very, very extensive. And this is one of the things that in the Western system, transits are widely used because they don't use dashas and bhuktis. In the Hindu system, the Indians use transits, but very basic. The Western transits are much more extensive. And really, if you know both systems, you really get much more clear material. So just to talk a little bit about transits, by the way, Pluto just in March entered Aquarius. Pluto entered Aquarius, and that Pluto in Aquarius is everything mental and intellectual and scientific. About 2017, people were saying, the people in artificial intelligence were saying, in some number of years, this is going to go very big. So it's this year. A couple months ago, everybody has the AI, GPT, chat, whatever it is. I don't do it. But once Pluto went into Aquarius, that's it. Artificial intelligence is out of the bag. It's not going back. So we now have that. Pluto in Aquarius is also going to have a big effect on friends and groups. Group activity is going to go through changes, and friends and humanitarian efforts. So in other words, with all the wars and all the starvation, with Pluto going into Pluto going into Aquarius, there will be a lot more universal welfare. There will be a lot more trying to help those people. Also talking about transits, I've mentioned this before on some videos. Uranus, the planet of change. Pluto is a planet of huge huge disruptions and explosions, and now it's exploding onto the AI, artificial intelligence, and friends and groups. Uranus is radical change. So Uranus went into Taurus in the tropical system around May 2018. In late 2017, Bitcoin went from 2,000 to 19,000. And in 2018 and 2019, anywhere you turned on the television, they were trying to explain what Bitcoin is. It became mainstream, okay? Now, that's in the tropical system. Uranus is going to go into Taurus in the sidereal system in May of 2024. So in May of 2024, again, you're going to see big changes with currency. Now, Taurus is money. So you're either going to see another big explosion with Bitcoin, or you're going to see the currency. They're now working on the CBDC, the central bank digital currency, so that you don't use dollars anymore. You just use the bank digital currency. So it might be that, we don't know, it might be Bitcoin, it might be the central bank digital currency. It could also be gold and silver, but you will see a big change in the currency, the same way Bitcoin came on the scene when it hit in the tropical. Next year in May, you're going to see either gold or silver, or the central bank digital currency, or Bitcoin again. So these are very important. But when it comes to the transits, it's if you know the transits, if you know how to use the transits, then you'll get better information about the dashas and bhuktis. For example, Donald Trump, I have in my book, Ancient Hindu Astrology, you can see it in the background, that white and blue. In that book, I talk about Donald Trump, and he has one really afflicted planet, and that is Venus. It's in the 12th house, within a couple degrees of Saturn in Cancer. It rules his 12th house. It rules his 10th house, which is career. Throughout his career, he's had a great career, but there would always be bankruptcies every so often. And so he goes into Venus Bhukti, which is always caused bankruptcies. He goes into Venus Bhukti 2 months before the 2024 election. And the 12th house is a very bad house. And if he's got lawsuits, the 12th house is jail. So jail becomes possible. Also, Venus is women. So the troubles he's had have been with women. There's a rape case from a woman. There's Dick Cheney's daughter. I forget her first name. Anyway, so he has troubles with the women. But when he hits Venus, that's going to be very bad. And that's 2024, late 2024. But you also want to look at what the transits are doing. You want to look and see, where are the transits? Are the transits hitting the 10th house? Are the transits hitting the Venus? So you really have to know both. Now, in the Western system, in the Hindu system, we simply say Saturn is in Aquarius now for the next 2.5 years. And if that's the 7th house, then it puts pressure on relationships. If it's the 2nd house, it puts pressure on money. But if there's a planet in that house of Aquarius and Saturn is transiting, in the Hindu system, we simply say that for those 2.5 years, that planet will be restricted and problematic. But in the Western system, the transits are about what happens when Saturn gets within 1 degree of that planet. So if the sun is in that house of Aquarius, if the sun is 12 degrees, when Saturn gets to be about 10, 11, 12, 13, for that could be 2 or 3 months. Saturn can sit in 1 degree for 2 or 3 months. So if you don't know that, if you don't know the meaning of Saturn conjuncting the 2nd house from the Western point of view, where the aspects are within 1, 2, 3 degrees, that's what you have to know. That's what this transit book is about, those kinds of transits. So anyway, Also, by the way, I don't know if they know this in the other countries, but we have Fox News, and Tucker Carlson has been huge. He practically he just has a huge presence, and he just got fired. So I went to look at the Dashas and Bhuktis, and in January 2022, he entered Saturn Dasha, and everybody thinks, oh, Saturn's bad. No, it depends. I'm in Saturn Dasha. It's great. It depends on how it is in your chart. Saturn in his horoscope is in the 10th house of career. It's fallen in the 10th degree of Aries. Saturn is known to be fallen in the 20th degree of Aries. So from 0 Aries to 20, it gets worse and worse. By the 10th degree, Saturn in Aries is very bad. He hit the Dasha, and now he's got 19 years of a rough Saturn Dasha. In the career, this will also affect his marriage because Saturn rules the 7th house. It'll also affect his money because it rules the 8th house. So he should be having Saturn yagyas now for the next 19 years, twice a year, nine-day yagyas with 7 priests is about $500. And that's what he should be doing for the next 19 years. So talk about transits now. Let's talk about the Jupiter transits first. These are pretty simple. Everybody knows Jupiter is good and it's going to bring luck. But the thing is, again, the Western transits come into play. Why? Because if a planet is in that house and it's afflicted and you think good things are going to happen, they won't. This is very interesting because 30 years ago, I wanted to buy a house and I went to get a mortgage, but I really, I didn't have much money in banks and things like that because, well, anyway, so when I went to get a mortgage, they turned me down. But the point is that Jupiter was transiting my 4th house. And on the week I was turned down, Jupiter conjuncted Venus. I thought, this is insane. Venus is very afflicted in my 4th house. It is in the Hindu system, it's in Leo, which is okay. But it's 1 degree, it's 2 degrees away from the 12th ruler Mars, and it's 2 degrees away from Ketu. So if you don't know how these transits work from the Western point of view, if you don't know that, then you think Jupiter is going through the 4th house. It's going to be great, for 4th house matters. It was not great because the planets in there were afflicted. And this is fascinating because in the introduction of that transit book, I quote Stephen Arroyo. Stephen Arroyo wrote one of the top 3 Western astrology books ever written, in my opinion. It's called Astrology, Karma, and Transformation. And it was all about Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And I believe that it may have been that book or a different book, but in one of his books, one of his 2 great books, he said, transit books are, you have to be very cautious about transit books because they tell you how the transits work. But if you don't know what those planets are doing natally, you will be wrong. And, astrology is not perfect. It's never going to be perfect. It doesn't work like that. It's too difficult. But the most difficult thing is the transits. Like with the planets in the houses, as long as you know the meaning of the planets in the houses, and as long as you know the aspects they are receiving, you can get the knowledge, you can get the predictions correct about the natal chart. But when it comes to the transits, you read, Pluto is transiting this planet and it's going to be a huge transformation of the career, blah, 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 blah. And some of the times it'll be perfectly accurate. And some of the times nothing will happen. And so you have to know what is going on natally with that planet. If Saturn conjuncts the sun, you think this is going to be a terrible transit, it's going to be very bad. But if Saturn and the sun are in a good relationship, in the Western system, we call it the trine, the 5th house aspect. If Saturn and Sun are in the trine aspect, they're functioning very well together at birth. So the person's very responsible, they're very disciplined. Saturn comes along and hits the Sun, and instead of getting bad results, you get good results because Saturn and the Sun are functioning well together. That's what you have to know. That's what this book tries to explain, along with the meanings of the transits. Now, the Jupiter transits, we always think Jupiter is going to be fantastic, but we also say that Jupiter is like Santa Claus, and it promises a lot, but it doesn't always deliver. I'm not saying it doesn't deliver because there's something wrong natally. I'm just saying that Jupiter is like luck and optimism, and sometimes you get something, sometimes you get very little. It's hard to know. But when Jupiter goes into the first house, essentially, it means that you will be lucky for that year. People will favor you. They will promote you. You'll get promotions. You get recognized. You may have been invisible, and now all of a sudden people are noticing you. People are flirting with you, like that. And the confidence rises, and there's a good amount of luck. So if there's some bad Dasha going on, you might not be so bad because people are favoring you. Basically, it's simple. Jupiter through the second house means money is going to be favored that year. Family life is going to be favored that year. The imagination, writing, teaching, communications, those are all second house matters. Imagination, writing, teaching, knowledge, money, family life, they all go pretty well. When Jupiter goes into the third house, the brothers and sisters, luck with brothers and sisters might have good experiences. And it's not just brothers and sisters, it's relatives in general. This is important to understand because yesterday I was doing a reading and the third house was bombarded by transit. Saturn was aspecting the third house. Saturn was aspecting the third house ruler, and Saturn was transiting the third house from the moon. It was a terrible third house feature. I said, you're going to have troubles with relatives and siblings. And she said, but the 11th house is eldest sibling. And I said, yes. And if Saturn goes through the 11th, you may have troubles with the eldest sibling. If Jupiter goes through the 11th, you may have luck with the eldest sibling. Be that as it may, if the house of relatives is bombarded, you're not going to get anything good from the eldest sibling either. It's going to be all relatives, all brothers and sisters, all relatives. And so in this case, if it's Jupiter through the third house, it's good for siblings, good for relatives. It's also, in the Hindu system, the second house is writing and teaching. In the Western system, the third house is the mind and communications. And you're going to see if Jupiter goes through that third house, even in the Hindu system, you're going to see that there's going to be some mental energy that's going to be pretty strong. And, and the ability to get things accomplished. The third house is excitement, running errands, getting things done. So whereas if Saturn's through the third house, you're spinning wheels, you're trying hard and getting nowhere. Jupiter's in the third house. Whatever you put your hands on, it goes smoothly. Your energy level is good. Your focus is good, like that. Jupiter through the fourth house, luck with land, homes, real estate. You might move. If Jupiter's in the fourth house by transit, and it's aspecting the fourth house from the moon, or the ruler of the fourth house from the moon, or the ruler of the fourth house while being in the fourth house, all of those, you have to look, in the Hindu system, you have to look at the transits from the houses, the rulers of the houses from the moon, and the ruler of the house from the moon. That's when I made a prediction for this woman yesterday. I said, you're definitely going to sell your home. She was trying to sell her house. I said, don't even, just wait. Next year, you're going to get, you'll be able to buy houses, sell houses. Jupiter is transiting the fourth, aspecting the ruler of the fourth, aspecting the fourth house from the moon, and the ruler of the fourth house from the moon. Even if Saturn was in the way, it would only be in the way with maybe one feature. Saturn might have been aspecting the fourth or the ruler of the fourth. So that's how that works. Jupiter in the fifth, luck with children, luck with investments and speculations, luck with mental optimism, the arts and creativity. But you must be very careful, because when you see Jupiter in the fifth house, Jupiter in the fifth house from the moon, Jupiter aspecting the ruler of the fifth house, and you think investments are going to be great, that would have been true 20 years ago when we still had a free market system. There is no free, I don't know about the other countries, but there is no free market system in America. The Federal Reserve manages everything. If stocks go way down, they print money, they'll do whatever they can do to make those stocks go up. So everybody makes at the same time and everybody loses at the same time. So you could have Jupiter in the fifth house, transiting the fifth house from the moon. If the market goes sour, everybody loses. I mean, you might get lucky and be the one person that doesn't lose, but I wouldn't bet on it. I would not tell my clients, oh yeah, go and invest because everything's great. I wouldn't do that. Not now. I would have years ago. I did. When Jupiter's in the fifth house, the mind is functioning very well. And fifth house is Purva Punya. So that's past life credit, which is connected to your sense of destiny. So when Jupiter's transiting the fifth house, you might start to have feelings of your destiny. I know I'm supposed to be doing this. I know I'm supposed to be having that. It's just a sense of destiny. Many of the presidents, they always have strong fifth houses because it's the house of kingship. Leadership, kingship is the fifth house. So many of the presidents have very strong fifth houses. And many of them had a very strong sense of destiny. So many presidents, Lyndon Johnson, when he was a child, said, I'm going to be president. I was working when I was 20, 21 years old. I was working in the Catskill Mountains for a bit. And there was a man there, an Italian man. This was an Italian villa. And I was working there for the summer. He was in the Navy with Richard Nixon. And he said, we used to have a dinner, we used to play cards, and there was this crazy guy with us playing cards, and he'd say, I'm going to be the president. I'm going to be the president. And we thought he was crazy. It was Richard Nixon. The fifth house is a sense of destiny. Okay. So Jupiter in the sixth house is the best year to work on your health. If you're going to diet, work on your health, it's very, very good. Happiness in the workplace, luck in the workplace, all of that stuff is good. You should not be having enemies and jealous people when Jupiter's in the sixth. It's a simple house. Jupiter in the seventh. I always tell clients, I get clients who are single a lot of times, and they're disappointed, and they think they're never going to have a good relationship. And or they're never going to have any relationship. And their thinking is so negative that I have to explain to them, not just that when Jupiter's transiting the seventh house, that it's a year for relationship. I have to tell them in the next 12 months, you're going to see people looking at you, staring at you. When you see them staring at you, it's because they're interested in you, because they won't know that because they're so negative. They're so, oh, nobody likes me. So you have to tell them when people are looking at you, they're trying to flirt with you. They're attracted to you. That's the year. And it could be a year for marriage, but whether it's a year for marriage, it's a year when you meet somebody. It's a year when you meet somebody. It's also very good for business. Seventh house is business.
Yes.
Interacting with people, partnerships, business partnerships, like that. Not a lot of other things that I know of other than partnerships and business is about it. Jupiter in the eighth house. So yesterday, I live on Mount Soma, and yesterday a neighbor had a birthday. And so I wanted to give her a little birthday present of some astrological information. So I go to the chart and I'm giving the astrological information, and what do I see? Jupiter has just entered the 8th house. So she's going to have a good year for astrology and metaphysics and psychic, like that. So in that year, you go to visit psychics. We have a town in Florida called Casadega, Florida. It's about a half hour north of Orlando, where Disney World is. And there's a town of they call themselves mediums. I call them psychics. It's a town of, they used to live in New York City, and they all got together and they lived in New York, not New York City, upstate New York. They lived in New York, and there were 20 or 30 of them. They all moved to Florida together to the town called Casadega. So if the person's anywhere near Florida, I tell, and Jupiter's transiting the 8th house, I tell them, take a weekend, go to Casadega, and sign up for 2 or 3 or 4 different psychics. Go to this psychic and go to that psychic. You know, it's quite interesting. I went when my son was 12 years old. I took him to 12 or 13, I don't know. I said, let's go to Casadega. We'll get some psychic readings. And I hadn't been doing astrology for a while because I quit for a while. But now I got back into astrology, but nobody knew it. No matter how much I advertised, they didn't know it. So the psychic is doing a reading. Her name is Diane Davis in Casadega. And she says, there's somebody named Roger is going to be instrumental in your career. All right. A month or two later, I get an email from Kapil Raj, and he says, would you like to talk on my show? I said, I did an interview. I was busy for the next 3 months from that interview. People kept emailing me. So anyway, that's the 8th house. The 8th house will also be money from unearned means, money from wills, legacies, insurance companies, pensions, royalties. If somebody's getting divorced and Jupiter's in the transiting the 7th house, I will say to them, if you can wait till Jupiter's in the 8th house, you may get a better settlement. You may get more money from the partner. So, and it's good. The 8th house is like Scorpio, transformation. So Jupiter through the 8th house is a very good time for therapy, therapy or anything that's going to free you up on the psychological, emotional level. The 9th house is very simple. It's a good year for, it's a good year for travel, higher knowledge, religion, philosophy. If somebody has a lawsuit and they have to go in front of a judge, it's better if Jupiter's transiting the 9th. If somebody's got Saturn transiting the 9th house, I will often say to them, you might not want to get in front of a judge. You might be completely in the right. The judge will be in a bad mood or whatever, But that's basically travel and gurus, good time to see gurus and higher knowledge coming in. Jupiter in the 10th, you have 1 year of luck in the career. But you have to remember, it is a lucky year. It's a question of how much luck it is. I would say mostly when Jupiter is transiting the 10th house, the recognition is there. But whether it causes your business to explode upwards, maybe not. It might, but usually it's more about you being the center of attention, people noticing you and, but, it doesn't necessarily mean that all of a sudden, your business is going to go from grossing 500,000 to 800. Doesn't necessarily mean that. But you being the center of attention, that's my experience with it. And it's good for father, good for government, things like that. Jupiter through the 11th house is good for friends and groups, particularly spiritual friends, spiritual groups, getting your desires fulfilled. When Jupiter's in the 11th, it aspects the 3rd and the 7th, the desire houses. So that's good for getting your desires fulfilled and friends and groups mainly. That's about it. Could be making money from side ventures. That could be a time when you could go after, get a friend together and say, let's do this business, for this particular, business or whatever. Could be good for that, for making money, side ventures. Jupiter in the 12th house, meditation. So Jupiter just entered my 12th house about a month ago. I used to meditate. I meditated twice a day for 30 years, from about 20 to 45, I never missed. I maybe missed 10 meditations. I was pursuing enlightenment. And then by the age of 45, 50, I'd meditate sporadically, etc. I still meditate sporadically. I had a dream about a week ago. I was dreaming and I was in meditation in the dream. And I said, oh my God, this is fantastic. I should start doing this every day. This is Jupiter transiting my 12th house. So meditation will go well. The 12th house is debts and expenses.
Yes.
So about a month ago, I get a letter from the government, from the IRS, the Internal Revenue. And whenever that happens, I get like that. It's never good to get a letter from the IRS. I quickly open the letter. You made a mistake on your 2020 taxes. This is 2.5 years ago. You overpaid by $1,200. We're sending you a $1,200 check. I was floored. This is Jupiter through the 12th house, debts and expenses. My mother passed away in 2014. And somewhere along the way, she had, I don't know, $2,000 that was floating around somewhere that was, and they contacted my brother and they said, your mother has money that never got to her. We'll give it to you and your brother if you fill out these forms, blah, blah, blah. We filled out the forms. Nothing came of it. This was years ago. Jupiter gets into the 12th house a month ago. My brother says, hey, there's another company. They're going to get us our money. And this time they'll do it. Jupiter through the 12th house. Now, I don't tell people money's going to come to you. That's more 8th house. But what I tell them is you're more likely to get bargains. So if you're buying something and the price is a certain price, just ask, can you do it a little cheaper? Like that. And it's good for psychological, etc. So that's Jupiter through the houses. But you always want to look. You want to look at the planets in those houses. Is Jupiter conjuncting them? And when you want to make the big predictions, especially is when Jupiter's within 1 degree. If the moon is 5 Aquarius, when Jupiter's in 4 Aquarius, 5 Aquarius, 6 Aquarius, that's when the big stuff happens. Okay? Saturn through the 1st house is one of the more difficult transits of Saturn. The two most difficult are the 1st house and 4th house. It's because of the houses that they rule and they aspect. So if Saturn's in the 1st, it's aspecting the 7th, and yeah, it's aspecting houses that are very, very critical. So everything is more restricted at that point. The career, the partner, it's just a difficult transit. But the main thing about it is you are supposed to be correcting your flaws. You are supposed to be correcting whatever flaws you have. So during those 2.5 years, you will feel less confident. You will feel more introspective. Guaranteed, people are going to let you know what they like and what they don't like. Mostly they'll let you know what they don't like. And you have to work on those flaws for those 2.5 years. So it's not the greatest time for accomplishment and recognition. It's not. But you also want to see, this is critical. Sometimes Saturn transits the 1st house and isn't aspecting any other planets. Other times, somebody's got 4 planets in the 10th house that are all getting hit by that Saturn in the 1st. Or somebody's got planets in the 7th house getting hit by that. So Saturn in the 1st is bad, but it's not the same as when Saturn's in the 1st and it's aspecting these other planets. And critically is when it's sitting on the ascendant degree. Saturn might sit on a planet for 3 months, It could sit on the ascendant degree for 3 months. And sometimes it hits the ascendant and it's gone in a week or two. It just depends on how Saturn's moving.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So it's introspective. Saturn through the second house is rough on money, but it's not about being rough on money. It's about wherever Saturn is, you will wake up in the morning thinking about that house signification in the morning and then going to bed at night. So it's in the first house. You're thinking all day long about, why am I not good enough? What do I have to change? Why are they criticizing me? If it's in the second house, you're thinking, how much money do I need to make? How am I going to make it? How much do I need? How am I going to make it? What do I have to do to make it? Many people are consumed with money, and for them, Saturn going through the second house isn't so bad, because if they're always consumed with making money, they usually focus on that area. But some people, like myself, I love money, but I wouldn't be an astrologer if I cared about money. So I don't really, think, how am I going to make this and how much am I going to make? It's not. So when Saturn goes through my second house, it's not good, because if I haven't been focused on making it, Saturn will say, listen, Johnson, how much do you need to make and what are you going to do to make it? Then you wake up in the morning thinking about money and you go to sleep at night. How am I going to make it? What do I got to do? Like that. Some people will make more money than ever when Saturn transits the second house. It's not a large percentage, but it's very specific. They make more money than ever before. In theory, it's because either their chart is very good for money and their second house is very good for money, or it's simply because they have always focused on money and been responsible. If you're focused on an area, that means you're responsible. So if they've been responsible, and Saturn will always give karma. And this is the thing. Saturn gives the karma of the short term as well as the long term. So if the karma is good with money from past lives, then when Saturn goes through that house, you get good results if the karma is good in that area. Saturn through the third house, no matter what happens, your energy level is going to go down. Your ability to focus and concentrate is going to be more difficult. So you're going to do the same amount of work that you were doing before Saturn in the third, but now you don't get the results. You get half the results. You have to work twice as hard. So when you see Saturn has transited the third house of somebody for the last couple of years, you can say the last couple of years were frustrating because no matter how hard you worked, you didn't get what you expected. And it'll also cause troubles with brothers and sisters and relatives generally. Saturn through the fourth house, bad for mother, generally not so good for mother. That means the mother's life could be difficult or your relationship with mother. Mainly, I say keep an eye on your mother. She may need your help. She may require more assistance. She may be more difficult with you, or her own life may be difficult. Saturn in the fourth house, terrible time to move. I can tell you stories of people that moved when Saturn was through the fourth house. They had a hard time building a house. I wouldn't build a house either when Saturn's transiting the fourth. The happiness in the heart could be a little restricted. And if the fourth house is natally afflicted and the sun, the planet of the heart, is afflicted, then there's going to be some heart problems are possible. So this is, if a person has heart history with their relatives, then you want to warn them. If the person's got a good fourth house natally and a good sun natally, it's not going to do anything to the heart. But if they have the fourth house and the heart are both natally afflicted, and then I might ask them, are there heart problems in your relatives? And if there are, I say you want to be very careful. Careful means if they feel something odd, go to the doctor when that's going on. Don't say, oh, well, it's over. It happened for 10 minutes, but it's over. No, you go to the doctor. Saturn in the fifth house, your children are going to become difficult. They're going to need help. They're going to cause problems, or they're going to have problems. It's not like they're huge problems. Saturn's always going to be causing some karma and some problems. Saturn through the fifth house is going to be the mind gets more depressed. So when Saturn's transiting the fifth house, I tell the people to make sure that you go to the movies, go to dances, because as the 2.5 years goes by, the mind gets more depressed. The happiness gets more, they need upliftment like that. Not so good for relationships, because fifth house is love affairs, but from the fifth house, Saturn aspects the seventh. So it's not so good for love matters and marriage, particularly. If somebody's pregnant, they're going to have a baby that year, I tell them be very careful, take it easy, rest a lot, so you don't have problems. Saturn through the sixth house could be troubles in the workplace. There's no question, when Saturn goes through the sixth house, you're going to be working harder than usual. You're going to be working more hours. You're going to have troubles with the bosses, with the co-workers. But what I always warn people about is the workplace is not just the co-workers. Doctors work for you, dentists work for you, dry cleaners work for you, handymen work for you. They will be problematic. I had a handyman. I used to call him the philosopher handyman, because he wasn't really a handyman by nature. He could do handiwork, but he's more a philosopher. He's more intellectual. But his work was very slow, and I had to pay by the hour. It used to drive me nuts. But I put up with it because it was hard getting a handyman. When Saturn went through the sixth house, he did a job that would have taken my old handyman who moved, would have taken him half a day. This took him like 2 days. That's a lot of extra hours. I said, I've got to be responsible now and find a handyman who is really a handyman, and that's what they do, you know. Saturn through the seventh house is learning lessons about marriage. If there's been a bad marriage and it's been bad for a long time, you will have the discipline to cut it off and end it. You'll have the discipline. If the marriage has been bad, but you haven't worked on it, then you go into therapy. Okay? Now, if you enter a relationship when Saturn's in the seventh house by transit, it's going to be serious. Do not enter a relationship thinking, oh, this will be fun. Because here's what happens. It'll be fun, but then you get hooked in and the relationship doesn't work and you can't leave. You can't leave because you have now found the person who's got everything that you want, but they've got this one flaw. And the one flaw is not workable. It's never going to be workable. And it forces you to figure out why you're going after partners that don't work. So don't enter it unless you like the person's character. If you see a major flaw, run the other way and try to find out why you're being attracted to somebody like that. Now, the most important thing I can tell you about this is that way more divorces happen when Jupiter transits the seventh house than Saturn. Saturn through the seventh is mostly about fixing a relationship, learning about why the relationships are problematic, learning about why you're lonely and why you're not having relationships. It gets you to say, all right, I'm lonely. I've got to do something and go meet someone. Jupiter in the seventh house, if you're in a bad relationship and you've been in a bad relationship, Jupiter goes into the seventh house and suddenly you're driving your car, you're stopped at the light and you see someone very good looking staring at you. And then you go to your workplace and somebody in the workplace is flirting with you and you say, I've got opportunities for love all around. Why should I be in this lousy relationship? Saturn transiting the seventh, you work on it, you try to fix it. In the cases where it's been bad for decades, oftentimes you just get the hell out. But it's more common Jupiter through the 7th will end it more commonly, in my experience. Saturn through the 8th house. My son had Saturn entering the 8th house, which is life and death. And suddenly our cat had got scratched by another cat, had a trauma. And about a month or two later, we could see that something was wrong. We didn't know what. And then suddenly he was sleeping all the time, just staying upstairs, not even coming down for food. We didn't know what was wrong. Took him to the vet. They said, so the kidneys are gone. So we had to, let the cat go. So my son, coincidentally, this is how Saturn's going through the 8th house. He's going to learn about death. Coincidentally, he had planned a visit for the week that we found out the cat was dying. It's his cat, but he went to college. He got the cat when he was 8 or 12. Now, he goes away to college, comes back twice a year, loves the cat, leaves, but it's his cat. Saturn goes into the 8th house, and now he learns about death. It was all of this, his visit was all about death. And, anyway, it was fascinating to watch how Saturn through the 8th had timed the death of his cat. And the cat lived a normal life, 15 years, but still Saturn managed to get him here to learn about death. But let me explain something. We called him up on the phone before he got here and we said, listen, we have some bad news. The cat's not doing so well. I had told him the cat wasn't doing well, but now I had to tell him. He said, Dad, don't worry about it. Every time I come home, I can see that Chippy's getting older. Chippy is now, I could see he's not going to live forever. I get off the phone, I go like, Vasti, it's okay. He's not going to freak out. He gets here and the tears and the waterworks, they don't stop. He's learning about death. But Saturn in the 8th is not a good time for pensions, royalties. If you're going through a divorce, it's not going to help you get money from the partner. It's going to put a damper on that. Saturn through the 8th house can also put you through emotional transformation, psychological emotional transformation. It'll press your buttons. The 8th house is about your buttons. It's about attachments. We suffer physically and we suffer from attachments. I want this, you can't have it. I want this person to treat me well. They don't treat you well. If you don't care how they treat you, it doesn't matter. It's the attachments. So Saturn goes through the 8th house, presses your buttons, and you find out, why am I suffering over this? Because I'm attached. Saturn through the 9th house, only travel for business or serious purposes. If you travel for fun, it's not going to be fun. Obstacles, delays, etc. Not a great time to visit to visit spiritual teachers. Not a good time for that. Not a good time for the law, for lawyers going into court. Not good. Saturn through the 10th is very interesting. It's organizational, administrative. So I'm selling my books on Amazon, and 2 of the books were out of print. One, the transit book, was you could have bought it on an ebook, you could have bought it, but you couldn't get it in a book form. This one, the aspects, the Western aspects, you could get it on an ebook, but you couldn't get it on, right? Now, I have to tell you, when it comes to promotion, I am the laziest. I'm just terrible at, I won't do what I'm supposed to do because I'm an artist. And to me, astrology is an art. I love performing. I love doing readings. I'm an artist. I'm not a promoter. I hate organization. Saturn gets in the 10th house and I say, you know what? I got to get those books on Amazon because people buy my other books, they'll see them. It's like torture, but Saturn's in the 10th house. I spent the last 2 months It took 2 months to go through these books, reading them over and over and over to, try to get them squared away, editing, getting them cleaner, making them better. And I never thought of it. It's just organization, administration. That's Saturn in the 10th. Now, if you have been working really hard at some profession for many years, Saturn will give you your karma back and your career gets bigger. I always tell people, if you're going to start a new career right around the time Saturn goes in the 10th house, don't expect any results. You'll be building a base, but don't expect rewards. You didn't do anything. So I've been doing astrology for all these decades. I got all these books. Last year, Saturn goes into my 10th house, into Aquarius, for about 2 or 3 months. And then suddenly things are changing. Suddenly I'm doing more videos. And then Joni Patry invites me to the Dallas conference. I never do conferences. I almost never do them. But I agreed. It's a long story why, but I said, yes, I will do it. We do a video the other day, about a week or two ago. We do a video in 24 hours. It gets 5,000 views. I get 20 emails for readings in one day. This is Saturn through the 10th house. But this is because I've been working hard, but to me, listen, I love writing books. It's hard work, but I love it. I enjoy it. I don't enjoy the promotional. I won't do it. I literally won't I just won't do it. I hate it. But Saturn gets in the 10th house and the organization and the administration, so it's getting bigger. But you also have to remember that Saturn's going to give you some karma back as well. So I've been doing videos for, 10, 20 years, whatever, but the last 5 years, a lot of them. When Saturn got into my 10th house last year, I'd be doing a video and all of a sudden something had come out of my mouth and I'd say, oh, I didn't want to say that. That's happened to me where I'll say something I don't want to say. And in my book, the Braha Sutras, I said, I have got to say my true feelings about nakshatras. And I did. And it's the biggest section in the book. I think nakshatras are great for muhurtas. I think they're great for putting marriages together. I think they're totally nonsense in terms of telling a person what their life's about. That's my opinion. Nobody else has said it. There have been I did get some emails. People would say, I have known this. I've told my students this, but nobody wants to say it, but somebody's got to say it. So I said it. You think people like that? They didn't like it. I mean, some did, but a lot of them didn't. And I've had some nights where I said, did I really need to say that? Why did I say that? A lot of people are going to be pissed off. But so that's Saturn through the 10th house. So you will get some blowback. You'll get some whatever. And if you do something wrong, then you could get, you could have trouble in the career if you do that. So you have to be a little bit careful, but it is about getting your karma back in whatever you've been doing over the decades. So Saturn through the 10th house is probably my favorite Saturn transit, because in my chart, I've never seen Saturn go through any house, do anything good, except the 10th. I've never seen it. That's not the case for other people. Some people, Saturn goes through the second and they have great money. Sometimes it'll fool me. They'll get good results. In my own life, I've seen enough, I've seen Saturn go through the chart a couple times, never does anything good, except in the 10th house, it does for me. Now, part of that is working hard. The other part of it is I have a strong 10th house natally. Rahu's in the 10th ruler's in the 5th, aspected by Jupiter, Venus, Mars aspect. I have a strong 10th house. Saturn goes through there and it does well. Coincidentally, I agreed to go to the Dallas conference, and it's the Joni Patry. It's called The Future of Astrology, and it's June 1st, June 2nd through the 5th. And after I agreed to it and everything, I happened to notice that Saturn's going to be right on my Rahu North Node in the 10th house, right at the time of the conference. And I said, now that's interesting. Normally, you don't really want Saturn to be hitting anything. But in my case, the North Node in the 10th house is what's fueled my big career. So the Saturn hitting the Rahu is probably, I would bet, going to be something where it makes Rahu stronger, is my guess. Anyway, Saturn through the 10th house could be bad for the father. It's possible. Saturn through the 11th house is definitely rough on friends. Now, Saturn, I told you, is in my 11th house. But, sorry, Saturn's in my 12th. No, sorry, Jupiter's in the 12th. Saturn is in my 10th. It is in the 10th house. It's in the 11th from the moon. Saturn's in my 10th house right now, but it's in the 11th from the moon, and I'm having troubles with friends. It's actually, the troubles are happening, and then I'm saying, I don't want that person as a friend. So when Saturn goes through the 11th or the 11th from the moon, it's going to cause problems with friends and groups, so that you can analyze which ones you want to keep and which ones you want to get rid of. That's basically it for me. It might be troubles with eldest sibling, could be. Eldest means eldest, not elder. All the siblings are the 3rd house except the oldest. That's the 11th. But it's troubles with friends and groups. Saturn through the 12th house is a time for debts and expenses, may be problematic. And therapy, having a lot of dreams at night, bringing up old issues. That's Saturn in the 12th house. Mainly, it could be sexual dysfunction, lack of sexual pleasure, could be, but mostly I'd watch out for debts and expenses. And if I see a lot of Saturn 12th house energy, Saturn in the 12th house, Saturn aspecting the 12th house from the moon, Saturn aspecting the ruler of the 12th. If I see a lot of 12th house Saturn problems, Saturn in the 12th, aspecting ruler of the 12th, 12th house from the moon, ruler of the 12th house, I will say, get your valuables in a safe deposit box. Don't leave them around. It's not just debts and expenses, it's theft. Now, as my astrologer Santanam, the famous author Santanam, used to say after our 2-hour nightly meetings, bus. Bus means end. I thought he was saying buzz, but it's bus.
Bus.
End. Bus.
Hindi words. Bus. That was very interesting, sir. Thank you so much. And I hope people will enjoy this. Sir has just released his previous book, doing many corrections in that. And he has just shown you the book. You all can get it at Amazon. Right, sir?
Yeah.
The book on transits. It will be an interesting read for everyone to go and buy that book. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.